You come and show me, because I'm waiting here for you. Wherever you are, won't you come and show me, because there's nothing here to lose. White socks, t-shirt, blue jeans, everyday people by all means, working with some machines, duty's calling now it seems. Looking up to the sky, sometimes can't help wondering why I'm stopped to change my life, change my heart. Wherever you are, won't you come and show me, cause I'm waiting here for you. Wherever you are, won't you come and show me, cause there's nothing here to lose. I'm buying a one-way ticket to Mars. I'm going far away, I'll see you someday. I wanna go and float amongst the stars. It's cold out here when no one else is near. I'm floating somewhere, dreaming big, why not dare? Living life way up here, up beyond the atmosphere. Not sure which way to go, never been far enough to be sure. Ain't like the place before, all alone. Wherever you are, won't you come and show me, cause I'm waiting here for you. Wherever you are, won't you come and show me, cause there's nothing here to lose. I'm buying a one-way ticket to Mars, Mars, going far away, I'll see you someday. I wanna go and float amongst the stars. It's cold out here when no one else is near. I think that I'm an ordinary guy, and that is why I'm leaving here. I wanna try and see if I can fly away high on life's frontier. I won't stop flying, won't stop, heart brings me. Oh yeah, I'm buying a one-way ticket to Mars. I'm going far away, I'll see you someday. I wanna go and float amongst the stars, but it's cold out here when no one else is near. I think that I'm an ordinary guy, and that is why I'm leaving here. I wanna try and see if I can fly away high on life's frontier.
Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you guys have a great night. We're the Bierman Brothers, and best of luck, Alyssa, with ours.
Thank you very much. Let's hear it again for the Bierman Brothers. They've been playing all day for us. Amazing talent. You know, the Bierman Brothers is really one of the reasons this event happened, to be honest. They are an amazing, amazing 18-year-old teenagers. I met with them a few weeks ago, and they told me they had a song called One-Way Ticket to Mars, and they asked about Elon Musk. And I said, you don't really need Elon Musk. The person you really need to speak to is Alyssa Carson. And that, honestly, is the reason this whole thing started. And we tried to put an event together. We had we thought about how to do it, and then suddenly we wanted to split the presentation. And what a nice time to have like a trip to Mars under the stars. And the Catalina Island Museum, Gail and her team really stepped up immediately. So let me introduce Gail. Let her say a few words.
Sorry. I did not mean to do that. I'm so sorry. What a way to start out. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we just wanted to say thank you for everyone being at the museum tonight. We donated the use of our space just for this event because we thought it was so great for the community. So we really are glad to see you all come out and enjoy this. And we're excited, just as excited to hear from Alyssa as you are. So I think it's about time.
Right?
Yeah, so Alyssa is, I want to tell you one more little quick story and we'll get to Alyssa. The reason that I was able to reach out to Alyssa is Bert, her dad, and I actually started doing productions in Louisiana more than 3 decades ago. So thanks to Alyssa, to the Bierman Brothers, I called Bert, and it had been a decade since we actually had even spoken on the phone. And immediately, oh man, what's going on? You know what I mean? It's like as if things had really we had never really parted. So, we're here tonight to talk about really the American dream, I think. This is the Mars generation is the way the event was entitled, because the Bierman Brothers, Alyssa, they represent a whole generation. As this generation, sort of like, we're in the midst of a generational change. And it creates a lot of domestic conflict. But we should really recognize how amazing this next generation is going to be. I mean, when we actually had to go out and do research, remember you had to go find an encyclopedia. We had to go do the research to find an idea and to research. Today they can just Google it. They can get it immediately. So that exponentially creates the ability to learn. People like Alyssa, the Bierman Brothers, the other musicians that play today, they come from a different ilk, and they're going to do amazing things. And as much as I want to introduce Alyssa, I think that really I haven't deserved that. I think it really should be her dad, because I've watched Bert. Honestly, I was there when it all began. And it was really tough times. I mean, things are good now. Things are really good for both of them. But I remember the days when it wasn't. But his daughter had a dream. She had her own American dream. And Bert did everything possible, even to the point where he didn't know where to go next to make it happen. He made it happen. And I think that is an amazing story. Both stories are amazing.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you too that the History Channel, this is history. You're seeing history tonight. The History Channel just left. They were here all day. They interviewed Alyssa and Bert for a show on unexplained mysteries. That's going to be in the spring. You'll see. We'll let you know when they are going to air. But History Channel thought enough of what's going on to be here today. So without any further ado, let me give you the man that really made it happen, Mr. Bert Carson.
Woo! You rock.
Hello. Yep.
Hello.
Hey, glad y'all could make it out. Thank you, David. I'll tell y'all a little secret. I paid David $100 to say what he said. So don't tell anybody. Okay? Thank y'all for being out. Thank you for supporting my child. I'm already choking up. When Alyssa came to me at 3 and said, she wanted to go to Mars, and I told her, sure, baby, you can do anything you want to do. I mean, I think that's what parents should tell their kids.
Yes.
No matter how crazy the dream is, you tell them they can do it, because it doesn't get any crazier than this. And it's getting more and more of a reality. And honestly, did I think we would be here today? No. I thought the next week she'd want to be a princess, the next week she'd be a frog, But she took on that passion, and she devoured everything she could find in the bookstores, DVDs, coloring books. She could spot something about space 3 aisles over. And it just kept growing, and that passion kept growing, and it was a curiosity of no one ever going and being on that planet. And now it's developed into, she feels like it is her destiny, her responsibility, her passion, her dream, and her desire for us to take that step out of the cradle, take that first baby step and go to Mars to save the human race. Because no matter how much we do here on this planet to try to save it, it is going to be consumed one day by the sun. Now, we'll all be gone, but we've got to become a multi-planet species if we're going to survive as a human race.
Right.
And this child has taken it upon herself, and I'm very proud of her for doing that. But even more importantly, I'm proud of how She inspires kids to find their dream. She inspires girls to get into STEM, to get into that male-dominated area that you know they're constantly pushed out of because our society says they shouldn't do that. And so I'm so proud of her for doing that. You know, she's never wanted to be an influencer. She's never wanted to be famous. She just wanted to go to Mars and save the human race. That's all. No big deal. You know, doesn't every kid want to do stuff like that? So I'm proud of what she's done. I'm proud that we've actually been able to move some kids on up the ladder. We've actually mentored a single mom with a son, and he went to work at Johnson Space Center at 16 years old, working on rocket engines. So that's what we're trying to do. That is our agenda, is to get these kids in those kind of positions at a younger age so that this generation, the Mars generation, will change this planet. I give you Alyssa Carson.
Testing, testing. All right. Hey, everyone. How's everyone doing? Everybody enjoy the music? I did. It's been pretty good night. All right. Well, I am going to give you guys a little talk tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I've done and what I do, and it's kind of almost like a different approach of wanting to become an astronaut. I like to think it's kind of like a newer approach. If you think back to some of like the original astronauts when they were first getting interested, if you ask a lot of them like about their story or how they went about becoming an astronaut, you know, most of them would probably say, you know, they might have had an interest, you know, when they were younger, and, you know, a lot of the shuttle astronauts, they may have had an interest in being an astronaut at a young age, but they usually kind of forget about it over time. Eventually, you know, they go off to do amazing things, fighter jet pilots, cool stuff like that. They usually see the application like, you know, I need some of those. Might as well apply, and they end up getting selected as astronauts. And so this is definitely almost like a new approach of astronauts, is really having the mentality from a young age. And, you know, although astronaut isn't necessarily a job in itself, you have to, you know, have a job to apply as an astronaut, but having that thought in the back of your mind is almost like a whole new approach to space, which is pretty fascinating that we're in such a new dawn of space. So I want to start off by giving you guys a little bit of background. My baby pictures. But I have a few photos, and the photo on the left is from my first ever space camp, so I was like 7. But kind of the first things that got me interested in space, you know, I've been interested for as long as I can remember. Kind of our best guess as to why I got interested in space is actually an episode of The Backyardigans, which is really goofy, but it's really the only place we can think of as to where I would have like heard the word Mars. No one in my family has any sort of space or science background, so it's not like Mars was a usual topic at like the dinner table. It was very unusual for me to come and start asking my dad questions about space and Mars and if people had ever been there before. And so my dad had told me a little bit about the missions to the moon, you know, a few things that he knew, but most importantly he said, you know, no one's been to Mars yet, but you know, there could be one day. And so at that young age, I definitely had that fascination for space. So kind of a little bit of what my dad said, you know, I was always wanting to eat up as much about space as possible. Whether that was, you know, videos, posters, you know, I had a Mars map in my room that I would study. I used to watch like the videos of Spirit and Opportunity bouncing and landing on Mars, and that was all super fascinating to me. And so when I turned 7, well, actually kind of before that, I had found out about space camp and begged my dad for over a year. All birthday presents, Christmas presents, it was like, let me go to space camp. So I eventually went when I was 7, and space camp was like the best long weekend of my life. Like, space camp was my Disney World, and it was so much fun to see like life-size rockets and build my own model rocket, play the role of an astronaut, and my dad went with me, so we did a parent-child. So like all the crazy spinning things, my dad did it too. So it was really fun to kind of have my dad with me to do all the space things, see how invested he was, and that was really the start of it all. After I went to space camp, I was hooked. So I went every single year. I was addicted to space camp, and space camp was really a great place for me to learn more about space. You know, when I was first getting interested, I was like, okay, yes, being an astronaut sounds cool, but what does that mean? You know, what are the different jobs of an astronaut? What are the different positions I could do? You know, what does all that mean and how do I get there? So that's really what the beginning of my journey was all about, is really figuring out, you know, how can these things come to be and how can you go after them? So that kind of leads more to some of the things that I have done since then. So like I said, I was mainly just going to space camps and trying to learn more about space, and then that kind of developed more into doing more realistic stuff. So when I was 15, I joined Project POSSUM, and POSSUM stands for Polar Suborbital Science in the Upper Mesosphere. So say that 5 times, I'm kidding. But that's pretty much a really fancy way of saying that we do a bunch of science in the upper atmosphere, but we also do a lot more than that. We do water survival, we do spacesuit evaluations, microgravity flights, a lot of really cool opportunities. So it was really amazing to be able to start that when I was 15. I was very, very young. To kind of give you an idea, everyone else who was in the program was either in college or already graduated from college. They were adults, working jobs, and also, you know, participating. So it was really amazing for them to allow me to start this when I was 15. And, you know, it was also an amazing experience because I was able to kind of prove to them that younger kids can, you know, contribute to the research just as much. So since then, they've allowed a good bit of 18-year-olds since me to kind of join the program. So it's been really amazing to see a lot more younger kids getting these same opportunities. So with Project POSSUM, that is the photo over there in the spacesuit. So this is a IVA spacesuit, which means it's spacesuits that we wear inside of a spacecraft. So to kind of give you an idea of what we were doing, I had to pull myself into a life raft while wearing this thing. And it's pretty heavy. We had an oxygen tank on our leg, but we were training if you come back from a space mission and you're in a capsule and you crash land, which is intentional. The crash part is intentional, so no worries there. But if a leak or something started happening, you know, how would you escape from that capsule? So that is what that training was about. And we learned how to escape from it, how you would do that with a team, how you would do that by yourself. So that was a really cool experience. And these spacesuits are also pretty cool to wear. Plus, they look cool, right? So, but some of the other stuff that I've done in this photo over here is when I flew with the Thunderbirds, which is a pretty recent thing. I did that at the beginning of this summer, so that was only a few months ago. Craziest thing I've ever done in my life. Those guys are absolutely amazing. You know, such strong, amazing pilots. And so I flew in the back seat of one of their fighter jets. We went on a whole profile. It was really funny, actually, when I was talking to the pilot before we took off. He asked me, you know, how many G's have you pulled before? And I was like, like 4.2 in a centrifuge. And he was like, cool, we'll do 5 or 6 on takeoff. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, this is intense. So we took off, and it was like euphoric. Like, all of a sudden, there's all these G's. We took off from the runway, went instantly vertical into the sky, and did some flip. I don't even know what happened. I was so confused, and we had a grand old time. We ended up doing 9 G's, which was very intense, but a really cool experience because usually space shuttle launches were like 8 G's. So I was like, shoot, I mean, it's almost like flying on the space shuttle in this thing. It's crazy fast. And the middle picture was when I did skydiving, which was also this summer. I did 25 skydiving jumps to get my A license. And the reason for that connection to space was the free fall aspect of skydiving. So when you're actually falling from the sky, you know, easy, you're in free fall, which is pretty cool because you're able to kind of maneuver your body in some way. So not quite microgravity, but pretty crazy. And it was really cool to see how comfortable you get in that space, you know. You're falling pretty quick, but you get used to it and you kind of get comfortable, kind of like how the astronauts get used to space. But here's a few other photos. Some scuba diving. This was actually also from this summer. I spent 25 hours underwater to become an aquanaut. So it was a saturation dive, which was really, really cool. And then also here's a picture of me floating. Yay! So I have done some microgravity flights, which has been really cool. I've done 2. So typically the way this works is you actually get in an airplane and you're able to float around and you get the experience of floating like an astronaut. So we have specialized airplane that can do this. So it goes up, you kind of like point the nose of the plane up. You have a few G's, not too much, only like 1 or 2, not too heavy. And then when the plane comes down, the plane's actually free falling, just like what I did in skydiving, except this time we're in a plane. So maybe a little more comfortable for some of you guys, but we are actually in a plane. But since everything kind of free falls at the same rate, you actually get the experience of floating. And we do this over and over and over again. The airplane that NASA uses to do this is nicknamed the Vomit Comet. I'm sure you can guess why. Doing the little loops over and over again can get a little hasty on the stomach, but this was a great experience. The first one I did was for research purposes. So we were running a bunch of different experiments while floating. So we were kind of like, we weren't buckled, but we were just kind of confined to our own space. Whereas on this one, man, this was flips and tricks, and they were throwing Skittles, and they were doing the whole shebang. So it was way more fun than the first one because we were actually able to float around and pretend like we were astronauts. So each time you do it, you get about 20 seconds of microgravity. So not too much, but enough to enjoy yourself. Once you get comfortable, it's like already over. So it's pretty addicting, but it was a whole lot of fun. So that can kind of give you an idea of some of the things that I've done to start building a resume to eventually apply to the astronaut selection process. So the ultimate goal, right now I'm in school, I'm studying astrobiology, which is pretty much science in space. So basically what I'm interested in doing is doing the actual science that goes on up there, looking forward to Mars. Astrobiology would kind of focus on looking for bacterial life on Mars. We know that we have found water, seeing if there's any sort of life in that water would be the next step. So that's kind of what I'm more interested in, and a lot of these experiences and things that I've done has really just been to prepare for that and get ready, build the resume. The astronaut selection process is pretty intense. Most astronauts are pretty incredible people, so I'm just trying to get up to their level and be able to kind of experience these things. But it's pretty incredible how close you can get to some of the actual training that astronauts do. Even if you have nothing to do with it, you can really get involved in some amazing experiences, and that's something that I've really loved getting to learn about, is because despite being young, I've been able to get involved in some really cool stuff, and it's really cool to be able to also teach kids that you don't have, if you're interested in something, you don't have to wait till you're in college, or you don't have to wait until you're older to go after some of these opportunities. You can start looking for them when you're younger, because they truly are there. So definitely don't be afraid to go after some of these stuff, because they're out there. So what we're really talking about, Mars, that's kind of the next step. I want to talk a little bit about what's kind of happening right now in the space industry, because it's quite busy, but I definitely want to kind of teach you guys a little bit about what's happening right now, because it's a lot. Space is booming right now. There's really a lot going on, but right now we're really looking towards the future of space. And so there is a new rocket, the Space Launch System right here, SLS. That's the newest rocket that's being built by NASA. Actually, the center core was built in Louisiana, so woo, got to see that. But we do a lot of the boring stuff, like the center core that no one's really going to talk about. But I like to talk about it. And then we also have the Orion Capsule. And this is primarily the part that the astronauts would actually be staying in. That's where the astronauts would be for takeoff and that sort of stuff. So this is like our new technology of space. This is what we're going to be using. And the plans is to take this rocket and this capsule back to the moon, and then eventually onto Mars. So the goal right now is to go back to the moon in 2024, 2025-ish era in the next couple of years, and then eventually onto Mars by the 2030s. So that's the goal right now. We already have a few astronauts selected for these missions to the moon. They're preparing, they're getting ready, as this rocket is also getting ready. So later this year, there should be some tests coming out with the SLS. It's been, the first one has been pretty much built and put together for a good bit now, so they'll start having to run some tests, just because these guys have to run. They can't sit around for too long. So that is something to look forward this year. And then, of course, the mission's going back to the moon soon. That's going to be something really amazing. Hopefully it will spark a lot of excitement, especially in young kids. It's been really, really interesting to kind of see the evolution of space. You know, we had the Space Shuttle program, which did so many amazing accomplishments, and then, you know, we had somewhat of a dead period as we were getting ready for this and starting to build this rocket, and these rockets definitely take a lot of time, so that's why we're slowly making our way to go back to the moon and onto Mars. But that's really is the ultimate goal. And, you know, a few other things to kind of keep an eye out for this year. There will be a new space telescope being launched later this year in November, which is also really interesting. That is the James Webb telescope. So some of you may know the Hubble telescope. So the James Webb is like the better version of Hubble, and that will be for a lot of research for deep space, so looking at star nurseries, other galaxies. So hopefully we'll have a lot of new exciting cool space pictures coming soon with the new telescope. So that's some of the stuff that's happening now. And also, speaking of now, something that is pretty relevant is commercial space. It's kind of like a whole new side of space travel, but it is very prevalent. I'm sure some of you guys have seen. We've had Jeff Bezos go to space. We've had Richard Branson go to space. We've had Wally Funk go to space with Jeff Bezos, which is really, really fascinating. So I'll kind of tell that story really quick because she's a really incredible woman. So Wally Funk, she just recently flew with Blue Origin and spent like 4 minutes in microgravity, but her journey to space was definitely a long time coming. So Wally Funk was actually a part of the Mercury 13, and this was 13 women who actually trained with the original 7 astronauts when the space program first started. And they were actually outperforming some of the guys in some of the different tests, but they never got the opportunity to go to space. And a lot of these women did so many incredible things. You know, Wally was a very famous aviator. She did a lot of cool stuff, and she was obsessed with going to space. But like I said, she didn't get the opportunity with, you know, some of those first 7 astronauts, and she just this past, you know, I guess a month ago, finally achieved that dream of going to space. And it was really cool to see that. She was, I think she's what, 80, 82, something like that. So she's really kicking it. She's doing awesome. So that's pretty cool to kind of see some of that history coming into today and some of these amazing people, you know, now gain the opportunity. So that's some of the amazing stuff that the commercial side of space really brings, is it brings a lot of opportunities to the space industry. You know, kind of Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin are focusing a little bit more on like the space tourism side, which, you know, I can get into that in a little bit, but it also allows a lot of scientists to send up more payload. We're able to do more experiments, send up more scientists to space to get even more knowledge, which is something really cool because for the first time ever, we're really able to do more than one thing in space. Typically, you know, we had to stop the Apollo program to start the shuttle program, and that's kind of how we've gone about it using NASA, but now we have so many opportunities to actually get to space, which is really cool. So we can have space tourism, we can have SpaceX send people to the International Space Station, we can have NASA send people to the moon, we can have NASA send people to Mars. There's so many opportunities, so that's why I'm saying space is really, really popular right now and has so many opportunities, but that's really because of all the resources that we have now. So just want you guys to know that space is cool, you know, we got a lot going on. So yes, that's some of the fun stuff that's happening right now in like the commercial industry, and kind of the idea behind space tourism, to kind of give you an idea of the purpose of it. You know, I'm sure a lot of people kind of wonder, you know, what's the point of like sending everyday people to space? You know, I'm sure some people it's, you know, just for like a joyride or to say they've been to space, but really kind of the impact that space tourism wants to have is, you know, a lot of the astronauts, once they come back from going to space, they have a new viewpoint or a new like focus of Earth. A lot of astronauts, we call it the overview effect, and the reason for that is, you know, once you go up into space, you're able to look back at the Earth. You see, you know, there's no borders looking back at the Earth from space. It's all one planet. You can also see how small and thin and fragile our atmosphere is. You know, Earth does so many amazing things to protect us from like radiation and a lot of other important stuff. And so when you're actually in space, actually seeing how thin that atmosphere is and how that little thing protects us so much, a lot of astronauts have a much greater appreciation for what Earth does for us. And so that's kind of the impact that space tourism would bring, is having everyday people being able to experience that and actually see what our Earth looks like from that viewpoint, because it's definitely a new perspective. So that would be the goal of space tourism, is to actually give these people that opportunity to see Earth from that perspective. So that's kind of some of the projects and ideas that's coming up in space. And also with SpaceX, they have a launch coming up September something. See, Google it. But in September, later September, they're having a launch, which is really, really amazing. They have a bunch of everyday people that are going to space, and they'll actually be orbiting, which is really cool and really different from what Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin did. Their missions were like up, 4 minutes in space and back. The people who are going on SpaceX's, everyday people flight, they'll actually be orbiting. So a lot of really cool people are now getting the opportunity to go to space. So it's becoming more normal. So if any of you have an idea of going to space, don't be worried yet. There's a chance. So definitely just some stuff to look forward to and some stuff to keep up with in the space industry if you're interested, because like I said, it really is booming and a lot of cool stuff is happening. So the next thing that I really want to focus on is really the next generation and how we can really have an impact on the next generation of kids. So kind of what I've been hitting on is, there really are a lot of things happening right now in space, and that really brings a lot of opportunity to the next generation. We're going to have a lot of really weird and fun space jobs that kids are going to be able to go into, space jobs that we don't even know about yet. With space tourism, we can have space flight attendants, and we can have all these new jobs that sound so weird, but these kids are going to have the opportunity to go into them if they really choose to. So my favorite part about really speaking to kids is being able to tell them about some of these opportunities that they're able to go into. I like for kids to think, you don't have to love science and math to be involved in the space industry. There are so many other jobs that play just as an important role. It takes tens of thousands of people to send one astronaut into space. It's not just the people on top of the rocket. It's all the people that put in all that time and hard work. Even thinking about this SLS rocket, it's been being built for years now. There have been people working on this for years, and they're just now seeing it kind of come more into the public light. And so it's really important that we acknowledge all these different jobs that our youth can go into, whether it's spacesuit designers, there's food psychologists, there's, of course, the journalists and all that. So definitely being able to kind of think of some of these non-traditional jobs, I think is really important for our youth. And, kind of speaking to the point of getting girls interested in STEM has definitely been really fun. So typically girls get interested in STEM around 11, but tend to lose that interest around the time they're 15. And so it's definitely something that's super important, because we kind of have to think about how we're going about these situations. A good example I like to use pretty often is, let's say a little girl breaks her bike. How are you going to address that situation? Are you going to fix it for her? Are you going to teach her how to fix it? Are you going to bring her brother out and teach him how to fix it, but not her? And that could be a thing that she absolutely hates doing, and maybe she'll never fix her bike again, and that's perfectly fine. Or maybe she'll really enjoy it and maybe be really interested in the way things work and gears and maybe mechanics, and who knows. So, it's definitely not something that you have to do all the time, but a lot of these situations, can make an impact on what they're interested in. So I always think it's important to try everything at least once. So it's really important that we're encouraging our youth to explore all sorts of different things, whether it's STEM or otherwise. There's so many amazing jobs that these kids are able to go into. So I truly think that is the goal of these future generations, is really empowering them to go after whatever their dreams may be, whether they sound crazy or not. Kind of like what my dad said when I was younger, saying I wanted to be an astronaut and go to Mars. That was literally the craziest thing I could have said. It was the most unrealistic. No one was talking about Mars. No one was thinking about Mars. However, the more I work towards it, the more of a reality it's become. And who knows? Now we are actually talking about Mars, and it actually is becoming more of a reality. So if a little kid comes to you with a pretty crazy idea, like space flight attendant or something that sounds pretty funky, you never know. These jobs really could become a reality. So it's all about encouraging them and empowering them to go after them. And like I said, also helping them look for those opportunities. A lot of the different things that I've been able to do have come from such weird places. The Project Possum that I talked about, a lot of those cool research opportunities. The reason why I got involved with Project Possum was actually because I was at a summer camp, and I was talking to one of the counselors, and she was just a college student. She wasn't anyone important, I guess, and she just said, hey, this thing's starting at my university. I don't know if you can do it, but it may be worth a phone call. And now I've been able to do spacesuit evaluations, water survival, and all that other cool stuff. So it's all about encouraging kids to really speak up about their dreams and being able to let them know that they can really talk about it and tell people what they're interested in doing, because you never know where the opportunities are coming from. So hopefully tonight you guys have at least a better idea of what's happening right now in space, and maybe have a little bit more of an interest, maybe, and, can kind of keep up with some of the stuff happening, and also continue to encourage our youth to go into whatever their dreams may be. It's telling them to follow their dreams and never let anyone take it away from them, because they're truly able to go after it all. So really, we are the Mars generation, and when I say that, I definitely think that, we all are kind of like the generation that will be able to either participate, help, be on, or even just watch people land on Mars. I definitely think that we're at a time where we have the capability, we have the technology to get to Mars. It's all about getting there. So I truly think we'll all be around to see that happen. So I really appreciate you guys all coming and listening to me tonight and learning a little bit more about space. I do know that we are going to have some time for questions and things like that, but thank you so much, and I guess to be thinking of some questions, so thanks. I don't know how we're going to do the questions, so I'll pass that to you.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah.
So let's give Alyssa Carson a big hand. Now we got questions. Here's a question right here. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, great.
Are you?
Oh. So the question is, am I scared to go to Mars? So that's a great question. I think that there are obviously a lot of risks that come with going to space. There's a lot of dangers of space, space debris, radiation, changes to the body, no oxygen, a few things, few minor, things that get in the way. But, I think that for me, being able to learn about the different challenges that we have with space from a young age has definitely helped, because for me, it feels like pretty normal. Like, of course, astronauts go through a lot of this. But also at the same time, I think the biggest thing is being able to meet people who work in the space industry. I think that if you meet anyone who works in space, you can automatically see how passionate they are for what they're doing. You can feel that passion. And even, the people who are working on these new rockets, they're already thinking about the possibility of there being people on board. And so they truly are thinking about any and every situation that could happen. So I think really the passion that radiates off of the people who work in the space industry is really what makes me feel most secure about going to space, because I know that they've already done everything they could to make it as perfect as possible. So, not too worried. Any other? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is it fun to float? And the answer is absolutely. I mean, who doesn't want to float? We actually, I think that a lot of people kind of think about like Superman, and we actually do a Superman like pose. So we actually like prepare for it. So one of the parabolas, we all like line up against the wall and lay on our stomachs, and then as soon as we go into microgravity, they count us off, and we all push off the wall at the same time with our arms extended and pretend to be Superman for a moment. So we do get the Superman moment. We get it photographed too. The cameraman's ready. So we do have a lot of fun with that. But, floating is definitely a cool experience. The best way I can describe it is totally like when you're on a roller coaster, kind of like going over like the hill of a roller coaster. You kind of feel your butt like, come up a little bit. Well, it's like that, but you don't go back down. And so it's almost like that feeling of like your stomach like coming up, and you're like anticipating the drop, but it never happens. You're just like, okay, now I'm up. And it's kind of interesting trying to figure out how to maneuver. Small touches make really big movements. So you can't like, woo, like kick off the wall. That you're gonna hurt yourself. So you have to make very gentle, smooth movements. So it's kind of a learning process, but it's definitely a lot of fun.
I have a good question.
Yeah.
So, with your mission to Mars, what are the benefits for Earth with that mission?
Yeah, so the question is, with the mission to Mars, what are some of the benefits from Earth? And it's an amazing question, because definitely everything that we do in space comes back to Earth, and that's really one of the things that is best about looking at going to Mars is it really does offer a lot of benefits with coming back here. Not only just the science and the things that we discover, but one of the ideas is Mars, could we terraform Mars? Could Mars be like a second planet for humans to live on? That would obviously be a long-term process, but it'd almost be preparing future generations. Maybe future generations need more space, maybe they need more resources as population continues to rise. Another thing, as we're terraforming Mars, maybe we learn how to clean Mars's atmosphere. Mars's atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide. If we learn how to do that, that could also help in cleaning Earth's atmosphere. Growing food on Mars, if we learn how to grow food in a place that is so crazy like Mars, we could also help and grow food in areas here on Earth that maybe struggle with agriculture. So there's definitely a lot of connections between Mars and Earth, and the main reason why Mars is a cool way to solve it is because Mars and space in general, pushes us to think outside the box. So we're kind of thinking within the realms of Earth when we're kind of thinking about some of these problems that we have, but Mars and space pushes us to think outside those boxes. And there are so many technologies that we all use every single day that was either invented for or by the space program in some way. So we truly all carry some sort of technology that was originally invented for space travel, and we now use as like a common object, and you would never think that it had anything to do with space, but that's really the benefit that space brings.
Yes.
So.
Do you like Star Trek?
Do I like Star Trek? Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I was always more interested in like real space than fake space. I can't say that I've seen too much of Star Trek. I've barely seen any of Star Wars or Star Trek. I don't know. There's someone named Darth Vader. That's all I know. That's not even Star Trek, but yes.
Hey, don't forget today is Gene Roddenberry's 100th birthday.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
She would like to know about astronaut food, type, and if there's astronaut cake.
Yeah, so astronaut food is pretty interesting. If you kind of think back to some of the original astronauts, a lot of them kind of complained about the food. Typically, when people think of astronaut food, they probably think of like the toothpaste tubes of food. Astronauts eat a lot better than that now. They have pretty good food. Just different types of food are packaged differently, and that's really, they have a whole department that figures out, how they're going to package those things in the best way to bring them to space with saving the most space and weight and things like that. So astronauts will have things like mac and cheese, they'll have peanut butter and jelly wraps. There are a few foods that we can't bring to space, for example, bread. No bread in space. Think about when you eat a sandwich, all those crumbs fall. In space, the key rule, everything floats, so all those crumbs are going to float around and get places that you don't want them to get. Same reason for soda. We don't have soda in space. What happens when you drink soda? Typically, you have to burp afterward, right? Well, in space, everything floats. So in your stomach, everything is floating. So when you burp, it's not just air. So anyway, that was shut down pretty quickly on the International Space Station. So we've tried a few things that didn't work out. The astronauts do eat pretty good. And typically before a mission, astronauts will typically be asked a little bit about like what foods they like, what foods they dislike. And that's actually because your taste buds change a little bit in space. So there's no sense of smell in space, and smell has such a strong impact on our senses and our sense of taste. So some things you may dislike down here that you like in space and vice versa. So they'll send a little bit of variety, and it's also really fun like on holiday, same with astronauts are eating, like they'll have like turkey and I meant turkey for Thanksgiving, but like things like that, they'll have like holiday food, which is pretty cool to see. So no worries, they're eating pretty good.
Questions over here. By the way, since you don't look over.
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering, how long does it take to become an astronaut? Like, how many years can you fit it in?
Yeah, so how long does it take to be an astronaut? And, every astronaut is pretty different. They all kind of have different backgrounds, so that's another important thing to realize is we have astronauts with so many different backgrounds. Some of them have flight backgrounds, some of them were in the military, some of them were civilians, some of them have medical backgrounds, some of them have science backgrounds, so it really depends on what you're going into. So to actually apply as an astronaut, you have to have at least a master's degree, several years of work experience, and then you have to pass the physical. Beyond that, it's kind of all up to you on what you want to add to your resume. So the requirements are relatively slim, and then past that, it's kind of like whatever you want to add to kind of stand out. But typically the way it works is you apply to the selection process, which can take, however long it takes you to get selected. Sometimes it takes a while. Some astronauts applied 7 times before getting selected, but a lot goes into it except your achievements. It also depends on what are they missing. Maybe they don't have enough pilots at the moment, so they're specifically looking for pilots, or maybe for a mission to Mars they need more scientists. So it all kind of depends on your timing and things like that. So it could take several attempts before getting selected. Typically after you're selected, you are an astronaut candidate because you haven't been to space yet, and during that time you'll do your training. So most astronauts do about 2 years of basic astronaut training, and then at that point you can be selected to be placed on a mission, and then you will train specifically for that mission. And then you're able to go to space, which is a lot of fun. So that's typically how the process works, which that's NASA's process. Now, if we have companies like SpaceX having their own astronauts, who knows? We'll see what they do. Yeah.
When do you predict that you will first step foot on Mars?
Yeah, so when would I step foot on Mars? That's a great question. So right now the goal is to start going to Mars by the early 2030s. That would be around the time that I think I would be in my prime as an astronaut if I was selected. Most astronauts are typically early mid-30s when they do go to space. Obviously it takes a good bit of time to actually become an astronaut, but astronauts are usually 30s and 40s typically. So that would be the plan, the ultimate plan for a mission to Mars. I'm not sure. Obviously I wouldn't complain about going to space before that, some of these commercial flights would be really cool to go on. But also at the same time, thinking about a mission to Mars, you kind of have to juggle, would you want an astronaut that's been on a mission before and has the experience of going to space, or would you want to have an astronaut that's never been to space before and they have less time on their body? Because when you're in space, your bones lose density, your muscles get weaker, and so the more time you spend in space, it becomes harder to come back. And so the mission to Mars being such a long mission, that's definitely going to be a lot of time on your body in microgravity. And so it's kind of a flipping coin. We're going to see how that all plays out and what kind of astronauts they'll want for those kinds of missions. So, yes.
What is something you're most looking forward to in this class?
Yeah, what's something I'm looking forward to the most? I don't know. I think actually being able to experience real microgravity is going to be super cool, but also I think just the views, kind of what I was talking about. A lot of astronauts will pick up a few hobbies while they're in space. Astronauts have an hour and a half of free time typically on rotation up on the actual space station. A lot of them pick up photography and things like that. So I think really just being able to be in space, looking at the stars, looking back at Earth, things like that, looking at the moon from that perspective, there's a lot of cool stuff to look at. And so I think actually being able to see that in person and fulfill that part of my dream would be the coolest part. So.
How long does it take to get to Mars?
Yeah, so how long does it take to get to Mars? Well, you see, as of right now, it takes about 6 months to get to Mars with our current technology. So that 6-month journey is actually using some older engines. So some of the engines on the SLS rocket, those are relatively older engines. However, there is already in development plasma engines, which will actually reduce that 6 months to 6 weeks. Woohoo, yeah. We're getting a little bit closer to a fast trip, but that would obviously be a lot faster. The first missions to Mars most likely will not use those engines. If you kind of notice within the space industry, space is always using older technologies, and the reason for that is technology is developing so fast that we can't actually implement them in space. So it takes a lot of time to rip everything out, put everything new in, go through all the testing, make sure it's safe. It takes a lot of time to do all those things, so typically we'll stick with the technology and roll with it. So it's coming, I do think that we'll eventually be able to shorten that trip to Mars. Yes. My favorite thing that I've learned about space. There's a lot of cool stuff about space. I think one of the coolest parts is really thinking about how big space is and really how much is out there. So a good analogy that I like to use a lot of the time is if we think about the size of our sun, the sun is massive to us. super massive. We think it's huge. So if we were to take that big old sun and we were to shrink it down to the size of a white blood cell in our body, so you would need a microscope to look at it, then just our Milky Way galaxy would be the size of the entire United States. So even though our solar system, geez, it takes 6 months just to get to Mars, it feels so big to us, but in reality, we are so, so small. And there are, and speaking of that, the US is just our galaxy, that's just the Milky Way, whereas there are thousands and thousands and thousands of galaxies that we already know of in our known universe. So space really does have so much opportunity and so much to explore just because of how big it is and how much there is left out there. And looking at us now, we've only been to the moon. Like, oh my gosh, look at how much more is out there to go after. So there really is so much out there. And so I think that's something really cool about space. I guess the second cool thing would be like, when you look at stars, you're looking at their past because of how long it takes for the light years to get to us. That's pretty cool because when you're looking up at the sky, you're pretty much looking at history, which is also pretty fascinating.
Do you think there's life beyond our planet?
Do I think there's life beyond our planet? I definitely think that there has to be something somewhere. Going off of the fact I just said, space is pretty big, so I do think that there has to be something somewhere. And I also do think that Mars does offer a lot of really amazing resources for life to be able to flourish. We have found liquid water, we have found ice, we have found steam. There's a lot of potential for some sort of bacteria to be growing in those environments. I don't think Mars necessarily has intelligent life. I feel like we would be able to see them or something. But I do think that there is the possibility of bacterial life and then eventually somewhere more intelligent life.
Are astronauts allowed to bring personal items? If so, what would be yours?
Yeah, so are astronauts allowed to bring personal items, and what would mine be? So astronauts are allowed to bring personal items. It is a very small bag that you get, so something that's really important is weight when you're going to space. So astronauts typically get a pretty small bag that they bring smaller things. So some of the stuff that I would probably want to bring, one would be my Right Stuff Award, and that was an award I got the first time that I went to space camp. It's like a camp award. It's not anything super, super special, but it's the highest award that they have at space camp. But since that was my first time going, it was definitely the beginning of this whole journey. So I think it'd be really cool to actually be able to bring that medal to space, kind of be a whole full circle moment. Of course, pictures of friends and family, like most astronauts do. And I've also talked about bringing a soccer ball to space or Mars. Might as well have some fun while you're out there. If you get to know any astronauts, most of them are pretty goofy. Most of them like to have a good time. So astronauts have done a lot of crazy stuff in space. They like to goof off some of the time. They're not all serious. So a soccer ball could be fun. Yes.
Where do you go to school, and what is your ideal immediate plan upon graduation?
Yeah, so where do I go to school and what are my plans after graduation? So I am going into my junior year at Florida Tech in Melbourne, Florida. There I am currently studying astrobiology. And astrobiology, like I said, is kind of just the general science in space. So my interest, astrobiology kind of covers all the sciences, and so that kind of gives room for a lot of different areas of research. But at the moment, upon graduation, the career path that I would want to go into is probably bacteria in space. Microbacteria has been the area that I've enjoyed the most in college, so probably studying bacteria, how they're affected in microgravity, also testing different soil samples moon, lunar regolith, Martian regolith, that sort of thing. So that's probably what I would do. Another really interesting job that also kind of has an interest of mine is actually being in charge of some sort of scientific payload that goes to space. So on the International Space Station, a lot of stuff is divided in racks. So I could be in charge of an entire rack that has a science experiment on it. And so all the stuff that happens to experiment would go through me. So that's another really interesting position. I actually heard about that job through an astrobiologist who went to Florida Tech. So she was super cool to talk to and kind of hear about that opportunity as well. So that's another job that kind of has my interest, but we'll see. Yes.
How does, can you communicate to people on Earth from Mars, like a cell phone, or do you have to use something with the rocket, or is there no communication?
Yeah, so good news, we have Wi-Fi on Mars, everyone. So there is indeed Wi-Fi. But there are a few technicalities that come with communication between Earth and Mars. So the way that we would picture communication between Earth and Mars, it would almost be like if you were talking to someone, it would have to make a video and like say everything you want to say and then send it. And the reason for that is Mars is so far away that there's actually a time delay. So on average, it's about 15 minutes. So it'd be like I said hello. 15 minutes later, you'll hear my hello, and if you said hello back, it'll be another 15 minutes till I hear it. So this is going to be a slow conversation if we use cell phones. So there is that time delay, and like I said, 15 minutes is on average, so sometimes it does take longer. But that is an excellent point to really say why we want to send humans to Mars and not only robots and technologies. We have a lot of amazing robots that have been on Mars and are still on Mars today, but with that time delay, it does take a long time to actually get valuable data back from these rovers and satellites and things, because let's say you're controlling a rover, you say, move forward 2 feet. 15 minutes later, it will hear you and move forward 2 feet. And then another 15 minutes later, you're like, yay, I moved forward 2 feet. So it's a very slow process. The people who do that have a lot of patience. But it is a very slow process kind of going back and forth, and that's because a lot of these rovers don't necessarily have minds of their own. And so with humans on Mars, they'd be able to say, oh, this rock looks interesting, let's take this experiment looks like something we could do. We have more of a capability. So it's predicted that we could do a year's work of a rover in like 6 hours on Mars, something like that. We could increase the speed that we're doing the science very rapidly by having people there. So that's kind of the benefit of having people. So, yes.
I've always been really interested in the psychological evaluation process of astronauts. You're in a small space for a long time, and even having to kind of convince of my own, it's such a place to get everybody happy or getting along in general. So that's something that I practice or learn about.
Yeah, so the psychological side of space is obviously very important, especially when talking about a mission to Mars. I mean, we're talking about being in a capsule with like other people for 6 months, so you have to like each other, you have to get real comfy. But, definitely the psychological part is something really important. It's definitely something that they look at during like their astronaut selection process. It is something that they do keep in mind. There are different ways to actually do like trainings and stuff for that psychological. We have what's called analog missions, where you actually simulate being on a space mission but here on Earth. So you'll go through the whole situation of like pretending that you're, let's say, on a moon base, and so you'll be with those same people. You won't be able to leave. You won't be able to just call your best friend on the phone and have a hour-long conversation. And so there are different areas that they are using to prepare for that. And something very interesting that NASA recently announced is they are doing an entire psychological mission to actually prepare for a mission to Mars. So they're currently looking for candidates to actually live in this habitat that will actually simulate a mission to Mars and the length of time of living on Mars. And so they're actually doing a lot of that psychological training right now. So it's going to be very interesting to get some of those results back, but they're currently looking for applicants, and then they're also building the habitat. So a lot of that's to come, but yeah, it's pretty well thought out. Yes.
I'd like to know, it's a small space, but like how much space do you have yourself? How do you sleep? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so in the way we sleep in space, it's kind of funny. It kind of depends on your personal preference. So this is mainly talking like on the International Space Station. So there's a few options. The first option is the free floaters, the astronauts that just like to float around. Some astronauts just like it because you wake up in a different spot than when you fell asleep. But there's some people that literally just fall asleep and they just like to float around, and that's their personal preference. Besides that, everyone else sleeps in sleeping bags. So one thing to keep in mind is there's no up in space. So we have gravity that tells us that this is down and that's up, but in space there is no gravity. So yay, every wall is useful. So you could have someone sleeping here, someone sleeping there, another guy there, someone else here. So you kind of have people all around you. But yeah, they have sleeping bags. The sleeping bags have little armholes. Your arms stick through it so you can zip yourself in. And then also everything floats in space. So of course you sleep with your arms floating like a zombie. So it's super cute. So you sleep with your arms kind of floating in the air, which is kind of funny to see the astronauts sleeping. And then sometimes you'll have, like on the International Space Station, some astronauts will have like their own little cubicle. So that's kind of more of some personal space. It's obviously very small, but you kind of step in, you'll have a little door. One side you'll have your sleeping bag, which you think is up, whatever you want to consider. And then they'll typically have a computer, some photos of family, that sort of thing. So you can have some personal space. Yes.
And also,
Yeah, so is eating and drinking hard and, sleeping, can you bunk yourself? The astronauts that free float, they probably bunk themselves all the time. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they're just kind of floating around. The astronauts in the sleeping bags, I mean, it's like a sleeping bag. It's relatively comfy. No one really complains too much. And as far as like eating and drinking, most astronauts, like I said, they eat relatively normal food. A lot of the time they'll have to like rehydrate some of the food. A lot of their food is dehydrated. Add hot water, it's yummy. And so they get to eat that. A lot of times astronauts are big on playing with their food as well. Again, everything floats, so it's kind of fun to like throw an orange at someone for fun. And also liquids form spheres in space, which is pretty interesting. So like if you'll see like orange juice in space, it looks like an M&M because it's a round, yellow dot. So it's kind of fun to, squirt water in the air and like fly like Superman and catch all the dots. So they definitely play around with their food a lot. So I don't think they have any difficulties. Yes.
Is there a story behind how you got the call sign Blueberry?
Yeah, so my call sign Blueberry. So a call sign is kind of like a nickname. Call signs originated in the military. If you've seen the movie Top Gun, you know what call signs are, Call signs eventually came to the space industry because a lot of the people who were involved in space were also involved in the military. But I got my call sign just from space camp. So the second time that I went to space camp, I wanted one of the blue flight suits. I wanted to be an astronaut, so I wanted to look like an astronaut. But I was a pretty small 8-year-old, so I didn't fit in any of the spacesuits or flight suits that they had. So my dad ended up finding like a knockoff fake flight suit, and it was just a really dark shade of blue and didn't match anyone. So everyone said it made me look like a blueberry, so they started calling me Blueberry throughout the rest of the week. I didn't really think much of it. Came back to space camp the next year. They're like, oh, look, it's a blueberry, and it never went away. So here I am still today, still Blueberry. But I feel like, most call signs have like a funny story behind them. Blueberry doesn't sound that bad, so I'm just going to stick with it so I don't get anything worse. So. Yes. Yeah, so kind of looking at the mission to Mars, basically what they're preparing for, NASA said that they don't necessarily plan on having any sort of one-way missions. NASA's goal has always kind of been to send people and return them safely, and that's kind of still their plans as we look forward to a mission to Mars. So a big topic, with that is, fuel supply and how are we going to get the fuel to send the astronauts back. So one important thing to kind of realize in space is we use most of the fuel to get off the planet. So gravity is like our worst enemy when it comes to like rocket launches. So we have to use so much fuel just to fight Earth's gravity to get us actually into space. Now, once you're in space, it's pretty easy. And like I said, when doing these microgravity flights, one small touch is going to get you really far. And it's the same thing with rockets. One small burst of your engine is going to send you going forever and ever and ever. There's no friction, there's no forces in space that are going to slow you down. So really the only fuel that you're using on the way to Mars is minor corrections to make sure you're going the right way. Don't want to end up at Venus or something. But yeah, it's all about those small corrections. So you really aren't using that much fuel on the way there and on the way back. And then again, actually launching from Mars is much easier than launching from Earth because there's less gravity. So you don't actually use as much fuel. So kind of the idea would be that astronauts would be living on Mars. They'd be able to be like generating and making fuel while they're there. So to kind of give you an idea of what we're thinking of for sending people to Mars, a lot of the like stuff that would be going would actually be sent beforehand. So like the habitats and things that the astronauts would be in would be sent beforehand, and that's because on the rocket that's bringing the astronauts, we want more important things like food, water, essentials. And then so a lot of that stuff will be sent beforehand, then humans will be able to like make things nice and comfy and homey. But the idea would be that we'd be able to generate some fuel while we're on the planet to actually be ready for the return. So that is one idea. There's obviously a lot of different ideas being thrown out there as far as like habitats and fuel supply. It's like changing daily or all the time depending on who you're talking to, because they're always coming up with newer and better ideas to make the mission even better. So that's something that's continuing to be in the works. Yes.
How far are we from traveling at light speed?
How far?
Also,
Yeah.
another question. Have you seen the movie Interstellar?
Interstellar. Yeah. So
What do
how?
you think about that?
Yeah, so how far away from being able to go light speed and, did I see Interstellar? So I did watch Interstellar. It's a long movie, but it's a good movie. But I do think that it's really interesting to kind of think of some of like those science fiction ideas of, like going different places. I actually get a lot of questions. I think maybe sometimes by kids, but even adults sometimes, like, if I go to Mars, will everyone I know like be dead when I come back? And I think that's from Interstellar. But no, so the time difference between Earth and Mars isn't that extreme. Like everyone will still be here, so no worries there. But I don't necessarily think we're super close to light speed. Like I said, the plasma engines that we're currently working on to get us to Mars will, obviously shorten the time, be much faster than our current engines. But I do think that light speed is probably still a little ways away. But I did enjoy Interstellar. It's always really fun thinking about some of like the weird things of space. Black holes, people devote their work to those kinds of stuff, so it's super interesting. Yes.
So do you have any knowledge of what the habitats are like there? And do you know if it's possible at all to like try and grow trees from here on Mars or something like that and try to create a more oxygenated atmosphere?
Yeah, so kind of the idea behind the habitat situation with Mars, again, there's a lot of different ideas being thrown around. But if you kind of like Google Mars habitat, I think you're gonna find like a dome. Like I don't know why, but the internet likes domes for Mars. But that is obviously like an idea. Another idea that I did a little bit of research in was actually for them to put the habitat under the surface. So I actually went to Iceland and I did some hiking and research geology work in lava tubes that are in Iceland. And they're actually looking to see if there are lava tubes or different areas like on the moon and Mars where we could put the habitat under the surface. And some of the advantages to that would be, Mars doesn't have as thick of an atmosphere. So hopefully the surface would be able to give a little bit of protection from like the radiation because Mars is gonna have more with a thinner atmosphere. Also protection from anything that would come from space that would hit Mars. And then also at the same time, you'd be able to have a double layer of pressurization. So you would have the habitat pressurized, but you could also pressurize part of the lava tube to where if something happened in the habitat, you wouldn't die. But I almost have like that second layer, which would be helpful. So that's one idea. But like I said, that sort of stuff is kind of changing really often. And like you'll read articles that are really crazy, like shrimp can be used to protect radiation for astronauts on Mars, and like they're always coming up with weird, fun stuff. So I think that's really cool. But a lot of universities are doing cool research on that. So yeah, yes. Yeah, so a lot of the rovers that have been on Mars and are currently on Mars, they have done digging, not like to the extreme that like I'm talking about, because most of the rovers that have been on Mars right now, Curiosity's main goal was to find water, which it did, which was amazing. Perseverance's main goal is actually to track some of these areas where we think water flowed to test for signs of life. So they kind of have their own like set goals that they're like preparing for. So none of them have necessarily been doing that. That's just kind of some of the research that we've done on Earth right now. But it could be something that we look into. Yes.
How do they have enough oxygen for a whole entire months of travel in the rocket ship? How do they recycle?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Everything in space is recycled. Like everything, like any and everything that you could think of is probably recycled in some way, just the same way that we do on the International Space Station. So a lot of the stuff that we'll use on Mars or even on the way to Mars is a lot of the systems that we use on the International Space Station. So actually, the water that's on the International Space Station is the most pure water that we have. It's even purer than the water that's naturally purified from Earth, which is really, really interesting. But like I said, everything is reused in some way. So obviously like air is filtered and that sort of thing. A lot of water going to the bathroom is reused. Yes, lovely.
Wow.
But like I said, the purification system is the best we have. So that's really interesting. But yeah, everything is reused to be able to be as like self-sustainable as possible. It costs a lot of money to send like 1 gallon of water to the International Space Station. So we try to reuse as much as possible. I think I even heard at some point, like, you know, when your computer like generates heat on your lap, sometimes they'll try to capture some of that heat from the technology to send it to like warm up some of the food. So like when I say everything is used for some sort of purpose, it's used.
It's about $10,000 to $15,000
Yeah.
per gallon.
Very
Wow.
expensive to send water. So do we want to
The
do?
$2 or $3 bottled water is expensive.
So we want to do one last question maybe, and then yeah, last one. Ooh, what foods would I take to space? That's interesting because I'm going to do like a whole crawfish boil in space, you know, with my Louisiana self. But I doubt they're going to let me do that. I don't know. It's pretty hard. I'm also like a pretty big like soup person. Like I like warm like soup, but I don't know. And then like the soup was form a sphere, so that's kind of awkward. So I mean, I don't really know. I mean, there's nothing necessarily. I mean, of course, I would probably. I mean, obviously not a crawfish boil, but some sort of Louisiana food would be nice. You know, yeah, maybe like some jambalaya or something. But yeah, we'll see how. We'll give that to the food team and see if they can figure that one out. I guess. Yeah, blueberries. That's true. Maybe they'll send some. But anyway, thank you everyone for coming and thank you for all your amazing questions.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. You know, if it would be me, I think I would probably take a Mars bar. Well, I mean, it could get worse, you know what I mean? I want to tell Alyssa, listen, you know, you get a certain age, everything starts to drop. You know what I mean? So come on. So listen, thank you for coming and listen, all of you care about the future. You should give yourselves a hand for being here. Thank you very much. Anybody else?